Good afternoon. The House was in Standing Finance Committee, and to that it will revert.
This House is in committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all the members who have contributed to this debate for the comprehensive contributions that they have made. Those contributions will help to further not just define but refine this program as we go forward. I want to thank in particular the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South. And I think that programs of this kind, projects, they touch him probably a lot, as well as some of the other members, because he knows what it is to have the experiences that most of these young men were experiencing prior to the introduction of this project, and still have not fully been able to overcome the challenges of poverty. I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for readily accepting that this was an important project, not simply because it was Christmas, as was implied, but because we understand that on an occasion like that as well, where everybody is enjoying the best of the time, and sometimes even to the extent not just addressing necessities, but also manifesting ostentation, that she felt that those at the lowest margins of society, economic and social margins of society, ought to share in the festive season. There's nothing wrong with that. The reality is that we wish we could have provided full employment. But if you measure it exclusively from the perspective of full employment, then you're likely to give people credit for full employment during the days of slavery without pay. So the issue here is not about providing employment for all and sundries. We want to provide employment for mankind when the state or even the private sector was in a position to provide employment for them and let them have reasonable rewards for the services that they are being offered. And I told you the reason why we could not move earlier on this exercise is because all economic indicators were very clear. You are coming out of a situation where some of the most destructive elements that ever entered these halls had raped and plundered the resources of Barbados. And we had finance equivalent to zero. You know, sometimes when you say these things to people, because you say it over and over again, because you want people to understand the realities. No government wants to have a high level of unemployment. No government wants to misrepresent the levels of unemployment in order to gain credit, because at the end of the day, it reflects itself in human behavior otherwise. So if people are not employed, the reality is immoral and criminal behavior and all types of means, unorthodox means, emerge in order to keep the people alive. People must eat, people must bathe, they must get soap, they must get toilet paper, they must have medicine, they must have access to certain social services. And if you don't have those in place, then the alternative of not having institutions and programs to moralize the leisure time of human beings, then they turn to other immoral activities in order to survive. Not because that they want to, but the only way they can sustain accepted social values is if there's no conflict between those social values and their survival. As long as you have a clash between the social values of young men and survival, survival will conquer. And ultimately, some of the greatest felonies likely to occur in the society. So this government did not make any superficial analysis of the reality that existed in December, on the eve of December and November, and young men and women walking around idle and watching people buy ham and turkey, wine and long necks, and could not enjoy these niceties, could not feed their children, could not buy a gift for the celebration of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. And the honorable member leader of the opposition should understand that better than me. So the government responds to the social and economic circumstances of the day. And that's why I said that the honorable member for St. Michael South and some of the other members who can empathize with these challenges that you face in a working class community, they will say the things that they said. And I am grateful for the comments and for the vision that you have demonstrated. So, in this exercise, it was about people, and it was about people being in a position to have that main medium of exchange that is so credibly exposed by the economists on a practically realistic. They have to have that medium of exchange so they can pay their bills and buy the services and buy the goods that they're required to live. Now, some other member made mention of using biomass. So after we cut the grass, not disposing of it as though it has no utility value, you dispose of it. No, the creative talent, not even the scientists, the creative talent of the people who were described as the wretched of the earth, the people who are practical scientists, the practitioners, understand the use of all of these kind of material things that can be put back into a whole recycling process, not through a manufacturer, but there's a recycling process that we can use in order to make the maximum use of all of these things, like what we call grass. So we call it mulch. It's a biomass, and it is of useful value because, especially at this time when the issue of water is so central to survival, human survival and survival of other living things as well, including plants, trees, etc. Those people pull the best of their experiences over a number of centuries. If you pass by the botanical gardens now, you will see the mole. You look at the plants. At this point, look at the plants. You will never believe that there's a scarcity of water on the landscape. Because academics are not the persons who are cultivating the soil. Ordinary men pull the best out of their creative abilities and find new methods in the middle of crisis, because the best that comes out of people, especially black people, is when we're going through hard times. And those people made sure that if you go up there, I'm not telling you anything, this is not poetry, this is not a short story. If you go up by the stadium, you're going to see those people putting that same grass that we give it a sophisticated title called mulch, at least about 6 inches above the soil, so that the water in the land serves the plant longer than only natural and times when we know that there's water coming. Now let me say this to you. Plants will not find themselves under this government starved of water, which is the element of life itself. Water is life, and life is water. Plant, and you know that from the creation or the evolution of man, whichever strand you respect. The River Nile is responsible for creativity and civilization. We would not take the potable water from the lands by going to the pipes and taking water from the pipes in order to water the trees. Superficial views of that kind normally comes from intellectuals. But we have a surface water that leaves the land space every day in volumes. And we have already, without dams, decided to trap the water at the course, at the end of the water course, and transport that water inland to make sure that we would not impose famine on ourselves. And we will keep the botanical gardens going. We will keep the tree planting program going. We will go to tree houses, where we know that in tree houses is a spring. And we are not going to be so ignorant of our responsibilities that we are going to drag every inch, every ounce, every meter out of the spring. And then people can't drink water in the way in Barbados because the aquifers are empty. But they got a whole set of prophets of gloom and doom, as though we are Bashais, men with bodies with no heads, and women. That you elect a government to office, 30 people to office from one party, and believe that the masses are ignorant and the people that they elected are also equally as ignorant in the society. And we've got to put up with that every day. And people spreading the message sometimes because it's simple to get a pen and put down basic material facts and simple sentences, and don't apply yourself to serious, profound analysis of the realities that we have in this country. Sir, I want to assure you that as Minister of the Environment, as Minister for the Beautification Program, I would prefer not to sleep 24, 48, 72 hours than to be comfortable in a state of ignorance. I don't understand. It is my responsibility. I have to answer to the cabinet of Barbados. I have to answer to the Prime Minister of Barbados. When I say that I want trucks, I want trucks. I don't have to make any apologies to anybody if I say I'm not Jesus, because I'm not Jesus. Nobody, whoever interpreted it to be deliberately a twist of arrogance, but that is the most absurd foolishness I've ever heard. If you ask me to answer a question that is beyond the capability of man, then I have to be superhuman. And if I have to be over superhuman, I must be some kind of Jesus or God. And you ask me if I am talking about garbage, you ask me about waste. If I talk about a problem at the hospital, you talking about waste. So you left with a preconceived view that you must box the minister. This is a man and a woman that writing records for prosperity that will misrepresent the truth of the hour of the day. And young generations, now born and those unborn, will have to pull the records sometimes of newspapers and look back to see what happened in the day and the time that these things were happening. And there's nothing that you can leave home with that can make you go beyond asking me when the truck's coming. When the trucks get here, the truck's too heavy. The trucks pay in white and not in red. The runners are on the side and not at the back. Nobody is capable of driving them. And you don't understand political targets. You don't understand not public information, but public propaganda. And that is what was happening to this ministry and this minister. You know why? They want to guide me. But it is better to let me stay where I am than to attempt to do what they were doing. They want to create unfriendly relationships among me and my colleagues and the nation of Barbados. But it's better to leave me where I am. Let sleeping dogs lie. And sir, I want to give the leader of the opposition the unequivocal assurance that at no time this program was designed or executed in any way to be partisan. This was about the young men and women of Barbados and engaging them in wholesome activities and putting dollars in their pocket. And whenever I made representation on their behalf, it was though the Prime Minister predicted me and was, before I can finish the sentence or the request, the Prime Minister is telling me, let it be done. And I want to thank her after the first 6 weeks for seeing the importance of sustaining this program. So nobody will tell me they got up this morning and say saw a rat with a chicken leg where none of it been. And then they say it's because of the incompetence of the Minister of the Environment. She understands this society probably better than most of us. So there was no partisan approach. Nobody agreed to any 12 members who oversee that. It is absolute nonsense. If they did it that way, that's their business. But at no time did we agree on any national policy to exclude any member of parliament in here, or any member of parliament in here had absolute. Obviously, if you're disconnected from your community, and I hope you were not, then you would not know the people in your community who would like work. I would like to believe the Honourable Member for St. Michael's West is very much in tune with what his community is demanding of. I see my people on Wednesdays, and I have a long list of all the skills of people. I have a long list of all the expectations of people and everything. If there's a program, as long as you, and you know that you are, as you said, you are my constituent. I have never demonstrated any level of resistance in any way to any request that you have made. And as long as I can accommodate you or anybody, even Don Villinis, I am prepared to accommodate them. Sir, this program, it touches on issues related to water, it touches on employment, it touches on trees, it touches on bush, it touches on beautification. And I want to thank everybody from whatever perspective you approach the subject matter. I want to thank everybody for making a contribution and understanding this is significant enough that members spoke on it. And as a result, I'll be better able to refine the program and make it better and better at each stage. I want to ask you, sir, and the Honourable House to move the head. I want to move the head 82 in the Ministry of the Environment and National Beautification stand power.
Senator. You want to state the amount? State the amount? You want to state the amount, or you want to state? All right. The question is that head 82 Starn Park in the amount of $748,800. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was taking your directions.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Head 86, sir. Head 86, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness, Ministry of Health and Wellness, in the sum of $1,180,500.
The honourable member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This part of the resolution has to do with the seeking the Honourable House through this Standing Finance Committee to make $1,180,500 available to the Ministry of Health and Wellness for the purpose of doing some remedial work at 2 locations in order to give this country the capacity to mandatory quarantine persons in relation to the ongoing novel coronavirus outbreak. And let me say from early that by quarantine, we are not speaking to persons who have the symptoms or who are sick as a result of the virus. The quarantine station is intended for persons who do not present with symptoms, who are not considered to be sick, but who, because of their travel history or their interactions with persons from one of the impacted areas, is considered as a person who is required to be placed under observation in a controlled environment for the period of, at this point in time, up to a maximum of 14 days. And this is all part of the comprehensive and flexible plan that the government of Barbados, at this time through the Ministry of Health and Wellness, has in response to what has to be characterized as a volatile strand of coronavirus, which is impacting mainland China for the most part, but which has now spread to other parts of the globe. And I say it is a comprehensive and a flexible plan because we recognize very, very early that we do not have all of the resources on this little rock to be able, for example, to not to allow or to prevent this virus from being imported into our country. So we have a plan which looks, for the most part, at minimizing the risk through some mitigation measures, and secondly, managing the risk. And that is the strategy that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has adopted, along with all of the other agencies of government that are providing support for us to be able to deal with this particular situation. In terms of mitigating measures, in order to minimize the risks, I will just mention a few of those so that you can see exactly where a quarantine station fits into the overall plan. And I'm saying minimizing the risks, Mr. Chairman, because we acknowledge the fact that we are not in a position to eliminate the risk. And that is obvious because there are several other countries with far greater resources than Barbados who clearly demonstrated that they have not been able to eliminate the risk. So our responsibility as a government and as a Ministry of Health and Wellness is to do everything within our power to minimize the risk and the exposure of the people of this country to the novel coronavirus 2019. So we said from early, and we've been monitoring this situation in the Ministry of Health and Wellness from very early in January. And we started to put some things in place to deal with what we anticipated will be the outcome of this particular virus. We started by ensuring, first of all, that we examine existing protocols that would have been utilized for SARS and Ebola, and which had to be adjusted in order to suit the peculiarities of this particular virus. And we also started to sensitize the public about some basic hygiene measures that they had to utilize or continue to utilize, and we stressed that they did so in terms of washing hands and so forth, some basic things that each and every single person in this country ought to be doing and can be doing to help us to mitigate the risk. Then, after we discovered that the virus was indeed spreading within China itself, within Wuhan city and Hubei province, we then recognized the need to go a step further, and we then started to really engage the other stakeholders within government, other stakeholders at the national, regional, and international levels, from the World Health Organization through to PAHO, through to the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA. And we've been doing this on an ongoing basis. And we recognize that given the complexity and the gravity of the situation, that it was necessary for us to establish and to stand up a health emergency operations center at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, so that we have a dedicated team of persons that are coming to work Sunday to Saturday, every day, to be able to deal with this matter. So the first thing that we decided that we will do at the ports of entry is to significantly enhance our surveillance regime. And we did so by, first of all, providing more persons to do the surveillance at ports of entry. And in this regard, I would like to thank the Chief of Staff and members of the Barbados Defense Force who are assisting us with their medical personnel at the ports of entry. And we've also been able to acquire some handheld thermal detectors to be able to strengthen our capacity at ports of entry. And I'm happy to say that I have observed these operations, certainly at the airport, and I have been able to sit and observe how the port health persons are dealing with people coming in from China and other places that have been impacted, and how the screening process has been going. And I'm really impressed with what I have seen, and I would like to thank them and to thank immigration, who's playing a very, very pivotal role in this process, and all of the frontline persons at the Grantley Adams International Airport and the Bridgetown Port. We've also been able to do a lot of training with frontline persons at these institutions, and I believe to date we would have been able to cover approximately 1,000 persons who are at the front line, not only the nursing personnel, red caps, immigration, customs, and we've even gone to now to deal with those working who drive the taxis, coach operators, and so on. All those persons who come in, we expect to come into contact, and who do come into contact with visitors at our ports of entry, so that they will understand and feel confident enough to be able to work in a collaborative effort with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to help us to keep this virus from entering our shores. We also had decided as a government that we will adhere to what the World Health Organization stated in their pronouncements on this matter, that countries should not restrict travel and trade. And so we did not go the route of closing our borders, and we did not do that willy-nilly, as I would say, but it really was based on evidence, based on the science, based on past experience, and based on what we've been able to analyze globally, regionally, and on our own capacity and ability to be able to deal with this matter. And I say that because I know there's been a lot of to and fro on this matter as a result of the fact that some of our neighboring territories have closed borders. But I was at a video conference recently called by PAHO Washington, and one of the Latin American countries, I would not name the country, the representative indicated that they had closed the border, and that by doing so, they now have a situation where they have a lot of people in the country, because people are still coming in and getting in, but they have no control because they don't know where they are. And this is one of the things that the World Health Organization had indicated early. So what we've done is, from the perspective of persons coming in, we did some risk assessments, because if you cannot eliminate, then you have to control, then you have to manage. And so the decision was taken that all persons entering this country, first of all from Wuhan, and that's a city of about 11 million, and then when it started to spread to the province in its entirety, and that's 60 million, Hubei province, we then determined that any persons coming from Hubei province, we would place in quarantine. Other parts of China and other parts of the world where there have been recorded cases, we deal with these cases on a case-by-case basis, and based on the travel history, and based on the risk analysis and the risk assessment for that particular area. So that if you have, for example, another city in China that may have 25 million, and then there are some provinces with more than 100 million persons, but with 650 recorded cases or confirmed cases, then for us, that is a low-risk person who is coming from one of those areas. And what we determine we will do with such persons is to place them into what we call self-quarantine, and that is mainly quarantine at home under the monitoring of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And this happens even in the metropolitan countries. United States, it happens in Australia, it happens in the United Kingdom. And that is because, as a small country, especially like ours, we do not have the capacity to quarantine large numbers of persons. And remember, I said by quarantine, we are not dealing with sick persons or persons who present with symptoms. So we are asking persons to remain at home. We give them a kit where they can do the temperature checks and report to the polyclinic within the catchment area, report those figures, that is. And the polyclinic also had a responsibility for sending people into the communities where these people are residing to be able to check on them, make sure that they were not developing the symptoms. Subsequent to that initial action, we then came up with putting a team together, a small team, 2 public health nurses who come to work every day to go and visit all of those persons wherever they are, do what they have to do in terms of the assessment, taking temperatures and so on, checking to ensure that they're not presenting with any symptoms, and then that is how we've been monitoring that situation. So that over the last few weeks, we would have been monitoring about 46 persons. The numbers are down. Well, my last count was about 19. Some persons have departed our shores. Some others would have completed the 14-day quarantine period. And after a final check, we're considered to be good to go, but we are still monitoring about 19 persons at the moment. So that is one side of it. That is the surveillance. That is the risk the management of the risks at that level. But then we recognized that there was a need to have a quarantine center established that would give us greater control, and especially dealing with people who we consider to be of a slightly higher risk or level of risk. And initially, we started by doing some work at Paragon Base in Christchurch to make a section of that facility that is down on the beach side, if you want to call it, or the seaside, to make a part of that available for us to be able to do that kind of quarantine. But that is only a temporary measure in that we do not want to impede the activities that would normally be taking place there. So we determined that we will move to a more permanent location, and that location is in St. Lucie, the St. Lucie District Hospital. That property has been earmarked and was utilized, although I'm not sure if we actually had to use it before, as a quarantine center during the time of SARS and other things of that nature. And so the funds that we are seeking to obtain here today really are required to have those facilities retrofitted and make them as comfortable as possible as a quarantine station in the case of St. Lucie. And this is very, very important because remember, and I repeat, these are not sick persons. These are not persons who have presented with symptoms. These are persons based on their travel history and the possibility that they might have interacted with other persons. Out of the abundance of caution, we want to bring them in for observation in a controlled environment away from their homes, but in a facility that offers enough comfort that they would not feel as though they're being treated in any demeaning manner. And that is really what we're trying to do here. The other side of this coin, of course, is that if, in the unlikely event, and I hope it remains unlikely, that we have persons who present with symptoms, whether at home, whether at ports of entry, or indeed at a quarantine station, then those persons will be removed from that environment immediately, and those persons will be taken out to the next facility, which is the Infections Control Center of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is located at Enmore. And those persons will be placed into that environment where they can be monitored, looked after in a much better way, and if necessary, then those persons can have tests can be done and sent to the next part of this plan, which is to the Best Dos Santos laboratory, public health laboratory, for testing, because that Best Dos Santos laboratory has the equipment that is required in order to do this test, and it is one of very few in the region. And as I speak, we have a consultant virologist from PAHO who's been sent here to commence training and testing for our personnel at the lab. Started yesterday, and the results have been very successful so far. Things are going very well. And I believe in short order, I'm absolutely certain in my mind that that lab would be ready in coming days to be able to perform testing for the new coronavirus. And that is all part of the plan of action that we have in dealing with this matter. In the event that we have spread, if we have a contact, then we may require more space than is currently available at the Infections Control Center, and we have a contingency, another plan in order to be able to cover for that eventuality, and that is an area of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital which can be isolated in terms of exit and entry from the remainder of the hospital, and that we will be able to use that facility. And the final contingency would be the ability of us to be able, if it is absolutely necessary, to bring the field medical facility into operation in one form or fashion. And obviously, if something happens in this country that overwhelms all of that capacity, then we are in a position to be able to seek assistance from our international partners so that we can manage this particular situation. So I think it was very important for me to explain why we're doing this in terms of commissioning, if you like, a quarantine facility. But there's one or two other things that I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, in regard to this particular debate. We've been fighting this thing from day one. But one of the greatest fights really has to do with fighting misinformation and the level of misinformation that is coming across social media platforms, and mischief in some cases. And during the meeting that I alluded to earlier with the PAHO, which was this hemisphere, you know, this was one of the things that came up from several other countries and asking, how do we deal with this matter? We've been dealing with it in Barbados by trying to counter the misinformation, not by responding to everything that is said that one would consider and can consider to be fake news, but by putting out lots of news, lots of information, I mean real information, genuine information, information from sources like PAHO, WHO, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, CARFA, trying to get that information into the public domain, and I believe that we have certainly been able to improve the volume of good traffic, if you want to put it that way, across the airwaves and across social media, and we will continue to do that, and to do it in a much bigger way going forward so that Barbadians would be able to get a true picture as to what is happening. The other thing that I want to say is that this is my belief that, yes, there's some anxiety, there's some fear, and there's some panic, and I understand that. I really do. I understand that because that is what happens when you are not sufficiently informed about a matter, and then you start to panic when you see all of these various bits of information flying at you. And it also happens, in my view, when you do not appreciate or understand or recognize the extent of the capacity that this country has and the ability of our people to be able to deal with something like this. And this is, we have a strong public health system, Mr. Chairman. We have persons in this country who've had decades of experience of dealing with matters of this nature. And we have a public health officer who is responsible for infections control in the geriatric system, for example, and I will speak about him as often as I can, because this person has 2 years' experience working in Sierra Leone. During the Ebola, he was on the ground zero, 2 years, and he was actually the consultant for the World Health Organization for infectious disease in Sierra Leone for those 2 years. And he brings that level of experience to this situation to help us to be able to equip a facility which we are calling the quarantine facility, and to manage that facility and develop the protocols that are necessary to be able to do what has to be done. We have public health doctors and nurses with decades of experience. And I was so happy at the airport to witness a public health and port health nurse interviewing persons who were coming in, and the level of information that she was able to share and the depth of knowledge coming from that particular individual gave me, even as Minister of Health and Wellness, comfort and assurance that we have people who can do what is required in a situation such as this. And the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in all of its manifestations, we've been meeting, bringing our best people together to deal with this situation. We have some technically qualified and experienced persons that are qualified, certified, and verified. And on top of that, Mr. Chairman, the able leadership of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Minister who has the full support and backing of a Prime Minister who cares, and a Cabinet and a Parliament, I believe, who really care about this country and who really working with us. And we've been working day and night trying to get the message across the length and breadth of this country, including training and sensitization. And I know that there are some sectors of society that may feel that we have excluded them, and that is not the case. Some pharmacists, for example, approached me on this, and they are very vital to this effort. However, we have to manage what is a challenging situation, because the remainder of the healthcare system in Barbados has to function. We have to continue to provide healthcare services on a daily basis while managing an international emergency. And we have to split ourselves into several parts, and not only managing an international emergency, but a real-time emergency, immediate actions and reactions because of the volatile nature of the emergency of the virus. And so we've started with the frontline persons, but now we are going into communities to be able to speak to people and give people a chance to engage us, and so that they can get a better understanding as to what is happening. And I really want to compliment all of the frontline staff, immigration, customs, the persons who do meet and greet at the airport, persons who do baggage handling, who work in the offices, who work in the airlines, at the airline counters, red caps, all persons, those who have to keep the bathrooms clean and tidy, all persons that we have engaged. And I want to say a really big thank you to those persons, not only on behalf of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, but on behalf of the government of Barbados. And to all Barbadians and all persons who live here on this rock, we have the capacity to fight this thing. We have the will to do so. All we have to do is to bring our collective skills together and to be our neighbors, keep our brothers, keep a lookout for each other and report things that look unusual or that you may have an issue with. And also for persons to practice the basic hygiene using the techniques that the staff of the Ministry of Health and Wellness have been going around demonstrating to people, doing so also on television. I urge Barbadians not to panic, but to become informed, become sensitized to what is happening. This question, for example, of people with everybody trying to get a mask, and in a lot of cases, the masks are not even the correct masks. And I saw, I believe it was a reporter from a newspaper trying to conduct interviews in town, and he was wearing the mask incorrectly, upside it down, I believe. The truth is, and right now, the World Health Organization has indicated that, and I guess we could have anticipated this, that there's a global shortage of masks. And in this country, the people who need masks the most are people who are sick, one, and people who are working with those that are sick. This virus is transmitted by droplets. You sneeze, you cough. So if you are 2 meters or more away from a person, you don't have an issue. It's not aerosolized. You don't have an issue. So let us leave things like masks and so on for the persons who need them and who need them most. And let us not panic, but let us work together. I can tell you that you ought to have some confidence in the local personnel, whether it's the personnel at the front line in terms of poor health, or those who will be working in quarantine centers, or those who are working at the Best Dos Santos laboratory. So, Mr. Deputy Chairman, I really would ask this House to grant the sums of money requested for a most vital cause, or most important project, and to reiterate the point that it is not for a facility that will be housing persons who are sick or who present with symptoms, but for those persons who, out of the abundance of caution and who in an effort and a greater effort to protect the public good, and in this matter, public health, that we want to be able to house such persons in a controlled environment where we can properly and more effectively and efficiently monitor them and assist them in being able to reintegrate with the remainder of society within the 14 days that has been allocated for their quarantine. And with those few words, Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you.
86. And I now move, Mr. Chair, that head 86, stand par.
Thank you. Second. The Honourable Member for Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acting Chair. And mine certainly would not be a partisan voice on matters such as this, unless I was persuaded that the government's program of preparation to counter any likelihood of Barbados being subject to the presence of this virus was one that was not thought through or ill thought through, or unless I felt that the government was hiding something from the people. There's nothing to suggest to me that either of that is the case. So mine would not be a partisan voice on the matter. Barbados can obviously ill afford the presence of a virus such as this. We're a small country with limited resources, densely populated country, densely populated areas, specifically, especially in urban Barbados. We are a country which is very much open to the presence of foreign business and foreign interests. We are a country dependent very much so on tourism revenues. And so for all of these reasons, we can very ill afford the presence, the unchecked or unmonitored presence of this virus in Barbados. And I appreciate the attempt of the Honourable Minister to give us as fulsome an update as is possible as to what the ministry led by him is doing to protect Barbadians and to protect the interests of Barbados. And he answered just about every question I had noted here. He did speak to points of screening being the major ports of entry, the airport and the seaport. The one further query I would have had perhaps with respect to that is the extent to which those who come on cruise transfers from airport to seaport are being monitored, because I do not think that they pass through necessarily the same incoming system as those who are coming to be resident visitors with us for a while, but have their own particular system for entry into the initial port and then transfer to the secondary port, and in that way they come into contact with Barbadians. So I just wonder what specifically with reference to that is the plan for screening and whether or not that has been considered. I do know that in other places the matter of house or home or self-quarantine is employed. The member mentioned some of the developed countries. My information was that it was being done in as close as Trinidad, and that they in fact do that, and I wondered if we would get to that here. That comes with its complications and certain inconveniences, and even in itself heightens perhaps some risk in certain regards if it's house or home or self-quarantine. But at least we're told that it will be employed here in Barbados. The other question I had related to the facilities to be provided at the initial quarantine center, identified today as the facility in St. Lucie, and the type of facilities that will be provided for people once you have quarantined them, because you're not quarantining people who are ill, you are not quarantining people who are showing symptoms, you are quarantining people who have been in an exposed environment, and therefore you've got to be careful that you provide some level of comfort associated with the facilities and the accommodation which you're providing for people for up to about a week, 2 weeks or so. Question in relation to that would be what happens to those who are found or proven to be infected or affected, and that also was answered that there's another level of restricted space and restricted movement, and that is the engagement of the facilities at the Enmore site. Now, Mr. Acting Chairman, a lot of people make much ado about persons who come out of recent visits, perhaps to China and certain other places, perhaps in Asia. I would suggest equally, perhaps if not equally, I would suggest importantly, that persons who come out of the United States and certain parts of Europe present a risk and a threat to us. We do a lot of business with the U.S. This virus is present in the U.S. As a matter of fact, I think I heard either last night or this morning that a person who had been quarantined in some part of the States was released, and after the release found to have been infected and actually a carrier of the virus, and a person had been released by mistake out into the general population. And the point I'm making is that we have a lot of tourism and other business movement between the United States, between certain parts of Europe and Barbados, whose populations have been exposed to some extent to the presence of this virus. So while we are careful as to monitor those who come out of China, we can't close our eyes to the fact that there are threats which could possibly come through traditional contact places such as the United States or the Europe. Not only do people come to us from those parts, but we go often to those parts in pursuit of business, in pursuit of markets for purchase to help with our various types of trade here in Barbados. And therefore, that is something we have to be very careful about. Apart from the facilities to be offered, I do not know what is the level of equipment that we have for testing and monitoring people. I know there are these handheld temperature monitors, which I presume will be part of the equipment initially used in Barbados. But I was privileged to be able to see other fairly simple yet sophisticated forms of equipment used, which scan people, monitor people more discreetly and just as efficiently and effectively. And I've seen piece of equipment in the form of something seeming like a video camera and a monitor, and Mr. Speaker, you pass within 15, 20 meters of that, it registers your temperature. You don't even know that you're being registered, monitored, and it measures accurately. Do not know the cost. Pardon? It measures accurately, Mr. Deputy and Acting Chairman, I would strongly like to suggest, and the Honourable Doctor out of Christchurch West can put it to the test. But from my knowledge and experience, it measures accurately, and it will say, and it will show the same readings. It will show the same readings as the handheld piece of equipment, which is pointed at your forehead or your temple area. I do not know the cost of such equipment, but to the extent that the government might be satisfied that this equipment is efficient and accurate and useful, and to the extent that it can be afforded, I would suggest it's the kind of thing that we need to invest in, not only for this present virus, but perhaps for others which inevitably will come along the way as long as life persists. I was going to ask about the availability of masks for Barbadians, but the minister has dismissed that outright as being totally, well, let me not put it that way, as not being as useful as some might think or as necessary as some might think. But I do still believe that in the event that unfortunately that virus is detected to be present here, I somehow still feel, Mr. Acting Speaker, that the population will feel a greater sense of security if such things are available. And I know there's a shortage in the world market, but if at all they can be found, I think in a population such as ours, we should avail ourselves of that. The last thing I'd like to raise is the lot or the well-being of Bajans who we know to be in China, a few of whom are in fact in the Wuhan city, and the Honourable Minister of Health may not be able to address that. Do not know if the Honourable Member St. James South out of the Foreign Affairs Ministry might be able to address that, or who can. But certainly we are aware that there are a few Barbadians who are locked in the epicenter of this thing. And it may be that it is nigh impossible to get them out. I do not know. But if you can't reach a situation where they are brought out, how is their lot being addressed? And what is being done for them? One would hate to think that they feel a sense of abandonment, a sense of being left on their own, and their lives exposed to chance. And I do not know from this distance what can be done or what is being done. I'm simply asking. I have had, I think, two instances, one instance for sure, of a parent who approached me on the matter to see if there was some influence I could bring to bear upon the foreign ministry with respect to a child in Wuhan province. And I've seen what has been publicly reported out of China by our representative office there. But beyond that, I do not know what information is being given to those parents, what kind of contact is being afforded them, that they can have consultations with people who may be able to address their concerns and their fears in relation to their relatives, especially children, in China and particularly so in Wuhan at this time. Obviously, Mr. Acting Chair, I support the vote for this money to help in this particular situation. We all pray that we don't face the frightening circumstance of the presence of that virus being detected in Barbados at any time. Thanks.
Yeah, member first and for the West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand to lend my support to this particular resolution also. I think what you're witnessing for the very first time in many, many years is a government that is proactive and not reactive. A government that continues to show that once you engage with the members of the civil service, we're talking about the technical people, the PSs, the other persons with the expertise, the knowledge. Once you begin to make them a part of the process of being able to tackle problems such as this, you begin to get the kinds of decisions to do the things that you do. And I just want on the record to thank those persons working within the Ministry of Health who have helped the minister, because the minister is the minister. But the minister alone or the members of this chamber cannot run a country by themselves. It is a combination of, and I think oftentimes people forget that. But I want to take this opportunity to reiterate that when you have that sanity, great things can be done. And this is a prime example of what we have accomplished. If you look around the region, in fact, I dare say not only within the CARICOM space, but if you look and you read the news and take note of what is happening, I would dare say that we are probably at this juncture ahead of the curve in the measures that we are taking to deal with this particular problem. And so I simply just want to again reiterate how important it is for us to continue on this track, on this journey of being able to look into the future and take the decisions that are going to protect the people of this country at all junctures, be it from this threat or any other threat. And so I want to again commend the minister for bringing this at this time. It is most important that the facilities that he's talking about are up and running, and I know that the Honourable Minister for St. Lucie is doing his all within the space that they're looking to do the things to allay any fears that people may have in terms of how they're going to use that particular space. And so it is important, very, very important, that as we move forward, we keep that conversation going with the people of St. Lucie and with the people of Barbados by extension, letting them know what steps we are taking, how things are going to be done, what monies need to be spent and why, what are we trying to do in the process. Because many times things just happen in countries and there seems to be a separation between how we talk to people, how we explain things to people, so that, as the minister rightly said earlier, the false information there becomes the truth if there's no counterbalance to it. And so this is important, that in this particular place, that we take the opportunity to speak to the wider public, to get them to understand why we take the steps that we take. But also to remind them, because another minister made the point earlier, you always have to remind people, how did you get here? How did you get here? I probably would have been one of the more shocked persons to learn that at our very international airport, the building that is there for screening people in the past, it's been there, but in total disrepair. Now, with a crisis like this, and that would be in disrepair for such a long time, could you imagine if we are not doing the things that we're doing now? What would happen if we had huge floods of people coming in, and God forbid that a number of them showed signs of contracting this virus? What would we be doing? We would find ourselves totally unprepared to deal with this. But with the good wisdom of the minister and his staff, and with the blessings of this cabinet, we are putting things in place to ensure that we can manage as best as humanly possible this particular problem. And I'm very proud to be a part of this decision making. But as I said, it goes even further than just being able to talk about what we're going to do. I know people oftentimes get weary of conversation after conversation after conversation if they don't see action. And this is one of those times where I am very, very sure that as soon as we get this resolution passed, that the Honourable Minister and the other persons who will be working with him will start the process right away. I know that it's been the subject of long discussions, long debates, and it's important that we get it done as soon as possible. So, with those few words, Mr. Chairman, I make my contribution to this.
Okay. Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Chairman, thanks to all honourable members who have spoken. There's not very much for me to say because I am very cognizant of the fact that we have to get in one more resolution. So I just want to end off by giving the assurance to the Chamber and to the people of Barbados that the government is throwing all of its resources behind this particular initiative and to try to keep our country as safe as possible in relation to any imported cases of novel coronavirus. And so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I beg to move that that head 86 stand part.
The question is that head 86 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 90, Ministry of Creatives, Economy, Culture and Sports, in the sum of $1,636,444.
Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The sum being requested is to reimburse the National Sports Council in respect of payments of severance, other remunerations, benefits, and employers' national insurance contributions to the former staff members of the Gymnasium Limited. Now, you may ask, Mr. Chairman, how did we get here? I'll go back, and I'm going to keep this very brief in the interest of time, but I have to go back to come forward. In 1992, the then government opened the Sir Garfield Sobers Complex. This is an indoor facility with a seating capacity of about 5,000 people. Now, the thought back then was to use this facility as part of their sports tourism drive, and also to give our local athletes, the ones who play games such as basketball, volleyball, indoor things, an opportunity to express themselves in a facility that would be better suited to their improvement. For me, as you know, if you look around the island, a lot of the facilities for sports are outdoor facilities, which, if you have bad weather, there's no practicing, there's no competition, there's no nothing. Anyway, in 1999, that entity was incorporated into the Gymnasium Limited. It then had a board of directors, and it was a company. On taking office last year, we realized that a number of things were causing us problems. Major problem had just left, but there were other things left behind that were causing problems. One of those problems was enormous wage bills, duplication of jobs and stuff like that. And the Prime Minister has always been talking about making things fit for purpose. And so one of the things that we looked at, and by a cabinet decision, we decided that the Gymnasium Limited and the National Sports Council should merge. And in so doing, there had to be a dissolution of the company, the Gymnasium Limited. Unfortunately, while we were doing that particular exercise, and I go back again to the way how people view things, one of the things that that was stark clear, but disturbing for us, is that there were no allocations at all for the paying of the very NAS contributions, employers' NAS contributions, the severance, and the other things. And so the National Sports Council, along with the ministry itself, had to make a decision in the best interest of those persons who were going to be terminated. Because under the law, we had to terminate all of the persons under Gymnasium Limited before we could rehire them back into the National Sports Council. Now, as the minister responsible for all of this going on, I probably would not have been able to sleep very well at nights if a situation arose where people would be going home without the monies that are due to them. Because too many times in the past, under another administration, we have seen that particular story play itself out over and over and over. And you can't, in all good conscience, if you care about people, expect people to go home in times such as difficult as the ones that we face now, under the circumstances, without being able to have what is due to them to at least get them through the transition. And so the monies, the sum of $1,636,444 was used to pay those persons who were being terminated. Today we are asking for approval to have this money reimbursed to the National Sports Council. We have undertaken a number of initiatives, and if people have been following the news, you've seen a lot of the things coming out in the newspapers in terms of, for instance, only on Sunday I was at the National Stadium where they just did some repairs to the track. We get it all ready for today where the schools can get back to having their sports there. We had to close it down for a little while. You would have seen prior to that, the removal of the roofing, which was a hazard to people on the same national stadium. And you know, at first it was a big furore about people being in the sun and all this stuff, and now it's become like second nature. People are there and enjoying themselves in what they call bleachers, so to speak. But this is a normal thing across the world where stadiums are built like that. And people are beginning to understand what we're doing. If you look at a lot of the pavilions that have been left in disrepair for a number of years, we've started to refurbish and fix a lot of those. And there's still a lot more work to be done. A number of schools have had some upgrades also in their sporting facilities, compliments in the National Sports Council. And so this money really is to go back into our kitty, so to speak, so that we can continue that work. And I believe that as we look now at sport in a complete different way, we're beginning to look at it not just as recreation, but we look at it for the social impact that it has upon people. When you talk about getting young people in particular involved in sporting activities, it teaches them so many different things. It teaches you how to deal with other people. It teaches you how to deal with problems. There's so many things you can get out of it, as well as the health and wellness benefits that sport can bring. And so I think that at this particular juncture, as we seek to expand the role of the National Sports Council in national development overall, and it's not just about young people, it's about everybody getting involved in some sort of sporting activity to keep Barbadians healthy. It's important that whatever monies we have are spent towards that particular goal of creating a much healthier and a much safer Barbados for all. And so, like I said, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to give any big, long speeches. I think most of the members in here can appreciate the limits on time, but also the general public can appreciate that this is a very simple and straightforward matter, so to speak. So with that being said, I'd like to ask that Head 90 in the sum of $1,636,444 stand part.
Second. The question is that Head 90 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Chairman of
The honourable member for
committees,
St Andrew.
I beg to move that you report the passing of one resolution. One money resolution.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour, the Deputy Speaker, the passing of one money resolution in the Standing Finance Committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Somebody call Jeffrey.
The chairman of the committee has reported the passing of one bill in Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read the first time.
The question is, seconded please. The question is that this resolution be read the first time. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
Seconded.
Beg second that.
The question is that this resolution be read a second time. All members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be agreed to.
Beg second that.
The question is that this resolution be now agreed to. All those honourable members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed. Nigel, adjourn the House. Suspend the House for 10 minutes.
Speaker, I beg to move that this sitting be suspended for 15 minutes.
Seconded, please. The question is that this House be now suspended for 15 minutes. That's, what's the time? 25 to 5? 25 to 5 this afternoon. This House is now suspended until 25 to 5.